this is Chrissi from Total Fluency. It's the end of week 5, so I've learned another 3 hours of German this week, which brings me to a grand total of 12 hours over the 5-week period that I've been studying. And if we compare that to the students who would be attending an intensive course, they've done over 125 hours of study, so I've saved over 100 hours of study already. I've accumulated just over 450 fluency units, so that means I've met my 10% marker now for the 4,500 target that I'm aiming for. Last week we talked about exercises, but this week I want to talk to you about assessment. And that's because you'll remember that SMART goals, the T of SMART goals, stands for tracking, and it's really important that you track your progress, so I want to talk to you about the assessments you can use to make sure that you're on track. Now, there are 2 types of assessment that you can do. The first is an external assessment, like I did last week with the Goethe Institute online test, but the second is something that you can do at home, which means you could do it any time, any place, just to see how you're progressing. Now, one of the things that you know I'm tracking is my fluency units, and that tells me how much I've learned, but it doesn't tell me how my ability is improving, and that's what we're going to be looking at today. Most assessments that you can find online or in a classroom are focused on what you've already learned, which means that the difficulty increases throughout the course and your marks will remain approximately the same. What we prefer to do is ensure that each test, each assessment remains the same and that your marks progress as you go through the course, which means your marks are more closely aligned with your progress. One of the reasons we focus on this approach is because you might take a different test each week and always get a good score, but still get to the end of your course and not see those scores bore out through your exam results. If you're taking the same test each week and you can see your results progressing, that's a clearer indication and a more sure indication of your end result. Now, it's important for you to notice that these assessments are very different from the exercises we were talking about last week. When you're doing a practical exercise, to practice your skills, you need to make sure that those exercises are at the right level for you. And to know that you're the right level, you'll be getting a score of between 80 and 95%. So make sure you don't confuse exercises and assessments. The first thing we assess is reading, because that's the first area in which you'll see progress. So let's have a look at the test that I did earlier this week. I originally took this assessment back in week 0, so that was before I started learning any German at all. And I think it's interesting for you to see that I didn't start at 0 coverage, I started at 10%. And that was based on me just knowing a couple of words, as I've mentioned before, from the television, from radio, and a couple that I was able to guess because they're very, very similar to English. Now, the change in my ability is dramatic, isn't it? You can see that I've gone from 1% coverage up to 40% for the words that I actually know. And that change is significant despite my only knowing 450 words and phrases. Now, we will see this progress tail off, of course, and at this stage it's interesting to note that whilst I can read 40% of the words, and understand 46% of the words, I'm not able to derive much meaning from the text itself, and will be monitoring my understanding of the text in subsequent tests. So as you can see, this is a simple assessment that you can run at home. Get a piece of text in the language that you're studying, count the number of words, and then just go through and highlight the ones that you can read and the ones that you might guess. If you've got a friend who speaks the language, then they can check your guesses. But even without that, you can get a rough idea of how you're progressing and monitor that throughout your program. I look forward to hearing from all of you on how your assessments are going, and I'll see you next week.